The first sound I remember wasn't a voice. It was a monitor screaming, sharp and mechanical, as if the room itself was panicking before I could. Then came the burn in my chest, violent and sudden, and my body jumped without my permission. When my eyes finally opened, the lights above me were cheap and unforgiving, the kind hospitals use to make sure nothing is hidden. A man leaned over me, calm in a way that felt practiced. His badge said ICU nurse. He told me I was safe. I knew he was lying, or at least guessing. My mouth was too dry to speak, but one thought pushed through the fog. My children. I asked where they were. He didn't answer right away. That pause told me more than words ever could. Later that night, when he thought I was asleep, I heard him on the phone near my bed. He said I was conscious. He asked if she wanted to speak to me. Someone said no. I stared at the ceiling, alive, listening to the proof that whatever happened to me next was already being decided without me. By the morning, the shock had settled into something heavier. Not pain. Awareness. The kind that sits behind your eyes and refuses to blink. A nurse I hadn't seen before came in just after sunrise to check my vitals. She smiled, polite and distant, the way people do when they know they're temporary in your life. When she reached for the table beside my bed, her hand brushed a folded piece of paper tucked beneath my water cup. She paused, then set it back without comment. I waited until she left before pulling it closer. Gone for 10 days. Hope you are better when we return. M&J. That was all. No date. No number. No urgency. It read like a note left on a kitchen counter before a vacation, not something written while your mother lay in intensive care with wires in her chest. I read it twice, then folded it neatly and slid it back under the cup. I didn't cry. I didn't feel anything sharp enough to cry over. The numbness was worse. It pressed down on me until even the machines in the room sounded far away. 9 days after my heart stopped, they discharged me. The hospital required a signature, someone to acknowledge responsibility. There was no one. A volunteer I'd never met wheeled me through the automatic doors and asked if I needed help into the transport van. He was kind. That made it harder. I thanked him and let him buckle me in like a child. The drive back to San Antonio felt longer than it should have. I watched familiar streets slide past the window, trying to convince myself that once I was home, something would make sense again. That this feeling was temporary. But when the van pulled up in front of my house, my stomach tightened before I could stop it. The curtains were wrong, the chairs on the porch were gone. I reached automatically for the ceramic frog planter by the steps, the one that had held a spare key for 20 years. It was empty. I knocked. Once. Then again. 15 minutes passed before the door opened. It wasn't my daughter. It wasn't my son. It was my son-in-law, Ryan, holding a coffee cup like he'd been interrupted mid-morning. He looked surprised, not relieved. Oh, he said. You're home sooner than we thought. He stepped aside without asking why I was there. Without asking how I was. I walked past him slowly, taking in a living room that no longer belonged to me. Furniture had been rearranged. The walls were half-painted a gray I would never have chosen. My wedding photos were stacked in a box near the corner. Frames facing inward like they'd been put in. Time out. On the dining table sat a glossy flyer. I picked it up and read the headline before my legs gave out. Charming Southern home. Ideal. For young families. My address was printed. Beneath it. I sat down hard in the nearest chair and stared at the words until they stopped meaning anything. On the kitchen counter, a manila folder lay open, papers fanned out like they'd been reviewed recently. I didn't need to touch them to know what they were. But I did anyway. Power of attorney. My signature was there, smooth and familiar, dated 3 years earlier. The day I'd had hip surgery. The day Melissa told me it was just insurance paperwork. Something harmless. Something routine. I remembered signing without my glasses, drifting in and out. Trusting her because she was my daughter and I was tired. Now that same paper sat on my counter like a weapon someone had been waiting to use. Ryan cleared his throat behind me. Melissa said we'd talk when you were stronger. I didn't answer. I reached for the old iPad Jason used to leave on a pantry shelf. It was still there, pushed back behind cereal boxes. When the screen lit up, his messages loaded automatically. He hadn't bothered to log out. They weren't careful. Once Mom's house sells, we'll finally have breathing room. Jason assisted living is lined up. No more boundaries. Melissa about time. Jason breathing room. From me. I closed the tablet and set it down carefully, like it might shatter if I moved too fast. My chest hurt, but not the way it had in the ICU. This was pressure. Wait. The realization that this wasn't confusion or panic on their part. It was planning. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table under a single bulb, the flyer spread in front of me like a notice of intent. My house had already been reduced to a marketing phrase. Charming. Ideal. Young families. No mention of the woman who paid it off. Who raised children there. Who nearly died alone. By dawn, I had made a decision. Not an emotional one. A practical one. I wasn't going to confront them. I wasn't going to argue. I was going to document. There was a name I hadn't thought about in years. Daniel Ruiz. He'd been my student once. Quiet. Smart. He wrote poems instead of essays and apologized for them. Last I'd heard, he'd gone to law school and opened a small practice on the west side. I called his office. When he answered, I said my name and waited. Mrs. Davis, he said after a beat. You taught me to write. What's wrong? I told him everything. Slowly. Without dramatics. I described the POA, the flyer, the messages. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said one sentence that changed the direction of everything. They overreached. His office was modest, above a taqueria, but when he laid the documents out on his desk, his tone sharpened. This power of attorney doesn't authorize real estate transfers, he said. They can't sell your house. Not legally. Relief came fast and made me dizzy. For the first time since the ICU, I felt solid. Daniel filed a petition that afternoon to rescind the POA and restore my full authority. He moved quickly. Faster than I expected. If we act now, he said, we get ahead of them. That evening, I went home and walked through the rooms one last time. Not to reminisce. To inventory. I changed the locks before sunset. An hour later, Ryan showed up and rattled the knob. I spoke through the door and told him to take his tools and leave before I donated them. He left without arguing. That was when it became clear. I wasn't their mother anymore. I was an obstacle. Daniel moved faster than I thought possible. Within 3 days, the court rescinded the power of attorney and restored my full control. There was no drama to it. No courtroom scene. Just filings, timestamps, a judge's signature, and an email confirmation that landed quietly in my inbox at 8:14 a.m. It felt anticlimactic. Which I learned later is how real reversals usually happen. Not with noise, but with paper. By the time Melissa realized what had happened, it was already done. She called once. Left a voicemail that sounded confused rather than apologetic. Jason sent a text asking if we could talk things through like adults. I didn't respond. I didn't block them either. I let the messages sit. Documentation works better when people believe they're still being heard. Staying in that house after that felt wrong. Not unsafe. Finished. Every room carried the memory of being rearranged without my consent. I understood then that if I stayed, they would try again. Maybe not with the same paperwork. Maybe not as carelessly. But people who decide you are in the way don't stop because they failed once. So I left first. I relist the house under my own name. Cash buyers only. No contingencies. Daniel reviewed everything before it went live. A young couple made an offer the same week. 11 days later, the sale closed. I sat in the empty living room on a folding chair, eating a peanut butter sandwich off a paper plate, and whispered to the walls, this is the last time. It wasn't sentimental. It was logistical. I needed to hear myself say it. The next morning, I went to the bank. I closed every joint account Melissa or Jason had ever touched. The teller didn't ask questions. She just followed the checklist. I opened new accounts under a different name. Not a fake one. A variation. Nora Williams. My grandmother's maiden name. It felt strange signing it, like putting on a coat that didn't belong to me but fit well enough. I packed what mattered. My husband's watch. A stack of photographs. A box of childhood drawings from a time when my children still believed I was capable of anything. Everything else stayed. Furniture. Dishes. Curtains. Objects lose their weight when you understand they were never the point. Before I left, I wrote 2 notes. One for each of them. 10 words each. No accusations. No requests. Thank you for teaching me who you really are. I left them on the kitchen counter beside the realtor's car. At sunrise, I loaded my belongings into the trunk of my Corolla. The paint was peeling. The radio only worked on one station. No one looks twice at a car like that. That was the idea. I drove north without GPS, stopping when I needed to sleep, eating when I remembered. By dusk, I crossed into Arkansas and pulled into a town so small it barely earned its name on the map. The sign read, "Welcome to Fair Haven. A place to rest." I took it as permission. I paid cash for a trailer behind a hardware store. The landlord asked 2 questions. Did I smoke? Cash or check? I told him no in cash. He handed me a key without asking my last name. That night, lying on a thin mattress with my boxes stacked like barricades, I waited for the fear to come. It didn't. What came instead was relief. The quiet kind. The kind that lets you breathe without wondering who is planning your absence. In Fair Haven, I became Nora Williams. Retired librarian. Widowed. No children. It was a story simple enough to remember and boring enough to be believed. In a town that size, people respect silence if you don't challenge theirs. I started volunteering at the library twice a week. Shelving books. Repairing bindings. The smell of paper and dust felt like home in a way my house never had. People smiled when they saw me. Children wandered over because I remembered their names. That was how I met Claire. She worked nights at the diner across the street. Single mother. Tired eyes. Quick laugh. Her son, Ethan, followed her everywhere with a stack of dog-eared comic books. The first time he called me Grandma Nora, my throat tightened, but I didn't correct him. Days settled into a rhythm. Mornings at the library. Afternoons helping Ethan with homework. Evenings sharing coffee with Claire after her shift. I kept a small notebook under my pillow and wrote down details of my new identity so I wouldn't slip. No San Antonio. No Melissa. No Jason. Just Nora. For a while, it worked. Then July came. Ethan's 9th birthday was held in the back room of the VFW hall. Paper streamers. Mismatched cupcakes. I sat beside him while he opened gifts and helped him read the cards. Someone handed me a party hat and I put it on without thinking. Another parent filmed a short clip on her phone. 30 seconds. Harmless. Ethan unwrapping a toy car while I clapped beside him. 3 days later. Claire burst into the library with her phone in her hand and fear on her face. You need to see this, she said. The video had been reposted. Then shared again. Someone recognized me. Old news clippings from San Antonio. Hospital records. A caption that made my stomach drop. Found her. Grandma Ghost is alive in Fairhaven. By morning, it had passed 1 million views. My face was everywhere again. Forums. Podcasts. Comment sections arguing about whether I was cruel or justified. I sat at my kitchen table rewriting my cover story as if that would keep it intact. Nora Williams. Retired librarian. Widowed. No children. The lies suddenly felt thin. Claire tried to reassure me. People forget, she said. It'll blow over. I had lived long enough to know better. If the internet could see me, so could my daughter. 2 days later. I saw a silver Toyota with Texas plates creeping past the library parking lot. It circled once. Then twice. Then parked too carefully. Melissa stepped out. She looked smaller. Older. Like shame had taken weight off her face. She stood near the entrance scanning until her eyes found me. I stayed behind the stacks for 5 minutes before stepping outside. Her voice broke on one word, Mom. I didn't rush. I didn't soften. I looked at her and said the only truth that mattered. I already held my funeral. You just weren't there. She tried to explain. I didn't let her. When I walked away, it wasn't dramatic. It was final. 3 weeks later, Jason sent a letter. Then asked to meet. We chose the cemetery. He wanted another chance. I didn't. Jason didn't ask to meet at my trailer. He didn't ask to meet at the library either. He suggested the cemetery on the edge of town, the one with the old oaks and the uneven stones. I understood why without asking. He wanted gravity. He wanted the setting to do some of the work for him. I agreed under one condition. No cameras. No explanations prepared in advance. Bring the letter. He arrived early. I saw him from a distance, standing near the path with a tote bag clutched against his chest like it might protect him. For a moment, he looked like the boy he used to be, the one who waited outside his first-grade classroom on the wrong day because he'd misunderstood the schedule. But when he sat down a few feet away from me on the bench near my husband Frank's headstone, that illusion faded. He handed me the envelope without speaking. Inside was the note I had written in the ICU. The one I barely remembered writing. My handwriting was unsteady, slanted by medication and fear. If I don't wake up, please forgive me. If I do, please come. I am scared, Jason had written in the margins. His words crowded the page, desperate and uneven. We didn't know how bad it was. I thought Melissa would go. I thought you'd understand. I am sorry, Mom. I folded the paper carefully and held it in my lap. Jason stared at the ground, his hands twisting together. I didn't know how to watch you get weak, he said finally. I thought if we moved fast, it would be easier. For everyone. For who? I asked. He didn't answer. I didn't need you to be strong, I said. I needed you to show up. His face collapsed. Tears came quickly, unchecked. You think I don't hate myself for it? He said. You think I sleep? I watched him cry without reaching for him. That surprised me. Not the crying. My lack of reaction to it. I think you sleep better than I did, I said. Because I was the one counting ceiling tiles, wondering why my children wouldn't answer the phone. Silence settled between us, heavy and unmoving. After a long moment, he asked the question he had been holding since the day he wrote that letter. Can I come back? He said. Can we try again? I shook my head slowly. That part of me, I said, you already buried. And this time, I chose the funeral. He reached toward me, unsure, asking permission with his hand. I stepped back. Not abruptly. Just enough. When I stood up and walked away, I didn't look over my shoulder. His sobs followed me down the path, but they weren't mine to carry anymore. The next morning, I sat at the small table in my trailer with a fresh sheet of notebook paper. The same notebook I'd once used to track passwords. The same one where I wrote down details of the life I was living now so I wouldn't slip. At the top of the page. I wrote 2 words, you did it. I paused. Then added another line, you got out. I made 2 lists. What I had left behind. A house that no longer felt like home. A name that had become a burden. Children who treated me like furniture to be cleared away. Then what I had gained. Quiet mornings. Honest conversations. A child who wanted nothing from me but attention. A friend who saw me as more than a bank account or a problem to solve. I folded the paper and slid it into a shoebox under the bed. Inside were Ethan's drawings and the only photograph I'd kept of Melissa and Jason from long ago, back when they still believed I could do anything. I closed the box without anger. Acceptance was lighter. That afternoon, Claire asked if I could help Ethan trim the hedges in front of their porch. I agreed. The work was simple. The sun was warm. When Ethan ran up holding a chipped seashell he'd found by the creek, he grinned and shouted, "Grandma Nora, look what I found." I smiled without thinking. That night, as I watched fireflies rise and disappear, Claire asked quietly, "Do you ever regret leaving?" I thought about the monitor flatlining. The note on the hospital table. The real estate flyer that turned my life into a commodity. "No," I said. "I regret staying as long as I did." She nodded. We let the silence stretch. It felt earned. The weeks after the cemetery were quiet in a way that felt deliberate, almost ceremonial. No more letters arrived. No unfamiliar cars passed the library twice. The internet moved on, as it always does, chasing the next story that could be flattened into a headline. My name faded from comment sections. Fairhaven returned to being small. I stayed, not because I was hiding anymore, but because there was nothing left to run from. I stopped writing my cover story down at night. I didn't need it memorized the way I once had. The fear of slipping had passed. If someone asked where I came from, I said, Texas, and left it there. People who respect silence don't press for detail. At the library, the staff trusted me with keys. Claire started leaving Ethan with me after school without asking first. He did his homework at the same table every day, legs swinging, pencil tapping when he got stuck. When he struggled, he looked to me without hesitation, not because I had answers, but because he knew I would stay until he found them. One afternoon, I received a forwarded email from Daniel. No urgency. No alarm. Just an update. Melissa had withdrawn her last inquiry. Jason had closed the remaining file. No further actions pending. The system, once nudged into motion, had finished its work. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. That evening, I took the shoebox from under the bed and opened it again. Ethan's drawings were on top, bright and uneven. Beneath them, the old photograph of my children, taken long before disappointment learned how to shape itself into decisions. I looked at it once, then placed it back in the box and closed the lid for the last time, not because it hurt, because it didn't later. Sitting on Claire's porch, watching Ethan chase fireflies through the yard, I felt something settle into place. Not forgiveness. Not triumph. Understanding. The kind that doesn't demand acknowledgement from anyone else. Family, I realized, isn't proven by paperwork or bloodlines. It's proven by presence. By who shows up when there's nothing to gain. By who answers when you are afraid. And cannot speak clearly. My children made their choices when they thought I was already gone. I made mine when I was finally strong enough to leave. The quiet didn't follow me because I ran. It followed me because I earned it.